Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started. I have a lot of introductions to do, but we'll make those nice and fast so we can get to the meat of tonight's discussion and presentation on what is always on the forefront of all of our minds, security and safety in our schools. So I would like to start by introducing some of the folks who are here from our team, our Livingston Public Schools team. First of all, for organizing this event, thank you to Tony McLaughlin, our Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, our Assistant Superintendent, 2 seats away, Lisa Steiger. We have over here the Principal of Livingston High School, Danielle Rosenzweig, the Principal of Mount Pleasant Middle School, Bronwyn O'Leary. We have members of our Board of Education here in the front, the President of the Board of Education, Seth Cohen, member of the Board of Education, Pam Charles, and member of the Board of Education, Janisa Arnett. We have our principal of Riker Hill Elementary School, who is, you'll learn in a second, is also instrumental in our security efforts here in the district, Justin Toomey. And then we have, we're so glad to have folks from our town government. We have the mayor of Livingston here with us tonight, Ed Meinhardt. Thank you for being here. And one of our town councilmen, Rudy Fernandez, and the person who runs Harrison Elementary School sitting right next to him, Pat Fernandez. There is no doubt about that. We are really happy to have the leadership of the Livingston Fire Department here. We'll be talking in a minute about the close partnership that we have with them. So Chief Mullen, Chief Chris Mullen right here, and Assistant Chief Francione right here. And then we have several folks from the Livingston Police Department who are also incredibly close partners in this work, who we talk to and enjoy their advice and their support all the time. I'll start on the end with Chief Gary Marshutz, Captain Tom Smith, Captain John Drum, Detective Kevin Mullaney, and behind me, who's going to be talking to us about cybersecurity tonight, our Director of Technology for the Livingston Public Schools, Teresa Raymond. So we talked already a little bit about our resources for tonight, and as I said before, school security is always on the forefront of our mind. I know it is for the community too, and I know that particularly as events unfolded last year, particularly in the spring, it moved even more to the forefront of the minds of our community. What you'll be hearing tonight is that it's something that we think about all the time. And it's not just in response to a particular event or a particular occurrence, but it's something that we live and communicate about almost on a daily basis. And we recognize every day that you parents who are here tonight, and we so appreciate your time too, that you entrust us with your most prized possessions. And it is an incredible responsibility that weighs on us every day, that 6,000 of the precious people that you send us are in our care. So that's what tonight is really about, talking about how we think about our schools and about making sure that their time in the schools is productive, is happy, is comfortable, but also is safe and secure. So you've met just about all of these people, so I will skip this slide since I did the introductions. We do have a strong and consistent partnership with the town, with the Livingston Police Department, and with the Livingston Fire Department. Some of the ways that we partner is we communicate. We are talking all the time about students. They know the families in town, they know our facilities, and we know them. So when they are in our buildings, and Danielle and Bronwyn and Justin can attest to it, we know the people that are coming in. So these folks are not strangers to us in the least. They are real partners, and we talk often and all the time. And actually, the idea for tonight's forum was born out of a summit that we did this summer where we all sat around the table just preparing for the new school year. So often we have conversations with a group here and a group there, and we all sat down together, and Mr. Cohen turned to me and said, wouldn't it be great to have the parents see this partnership in action? And I think you'll enjoy seeing that tonight. Of course, we practice. We practice in case of fire, we practice in case of other emergencies, and these folks here are in our buildings helping us, watching us, providing us feedback, giving us pointers of how we can do better, making sure that we have the latest information and the latest methods of doing things efficiently and effectively. So another way that we partner all the time is they are here helping us with our drills, with our practice, with our students. We often meet just proactively, talking about planning and strategy. How do we make our schools safer? And we're not only talking about people coming in and out of the schools, we're talking about traffic around the schools, we're talking about lunchtime, we're talking about recess. So the best time to come up with ideas and to talk about ideas is when you're not in an emergency. So making sure that we're being proactive in planning is something that we do regularly. There are situations that come up that are of concern. Those of you who are parents at the high school saw the letter today that we had an incident where there was a swastika and a racial slur on a desk. The first people we reached out to was the Livingston Police Department. And they assist us with investigating those kinds of things, and they do their investigation, they assist us with ours. We talk about the best strategies to try to determine who did it, and then once assuming we have a successful investigation, about how we remediate with that child in terms of consequence and education. Those are conversations that we have with the police department also. We've had certainly situations where there have been incidents in the building that we can do better in terms of prevention for fire and safety within the building. A couple years ago, we had a bunch of power outages, and the chief was there in the morning making sure our schools were safe. So there are situational things that come up, and we work together when those situations occurs. Training and professional development. We are so happy when our partners can be in with us, talking to our teachers, talking to our students about how to be safe in school. And I think this afternoon you were here, Kevin, so Detective Mulaney comes and trains all of our staff at every building on a myriad of security items and knows our teachers and knows the staff that we work with, and they feel so comfortable with him. I've been in a bunch of his trainings. They have no hesitation in raising hands and asking questions and making sure they get the information clear. So that's another way that we partner, is through training and professional development. And then in collaboration and problem solving. Sometimes we get calls from people in the public. If we have a door that got propped open, or we have a particular traffic situation in the morning, we have to remediate that, and we have to come up with how we solve that problem, because those things can't happen again, right? So we problem solve together, and it's important for everybody in the room to know, and for the community to know, that we have amazing municipal resources that are willing and able and do work with the schools on a regular basis. That's some of the way. Yeah, maybe so. Well, I'll start with it. So another organization that we work with is the Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning. And one of the things that through the Department of Education, every district identifies usually an administrator who serves the district as the security and safety coordinator for the district. So in addition to myself and all of our administrators, this person becomes a point person. And that position has really ramped up over the course of the year. And Mr. Toomey is our point person and has undergone extensive training. They've really ramped up the training for the position. And I'm going to have him talk a little bit about what he does in conjunction with the state.
Thank you, Dr. Block. Thank you for the opportunity. It's nice to be here. Again, my name is Justin Toomey. I'm the proud principal of Riker Hill Elementary School, home of the Rams, as well as the district safety and security specialist. And obviously, like all of the educators here, I'm an educator. I'm not a law enforcement official, nor do I pretend to play one on TV. But my role is essentially to make sure that we are adhering to the administrative code and all of the things that come from the state. An example of this, the drill law that was just updated in early 2022 required that we start to take certain things into consideration that we might not have done so in the past. For instance, trauma response, right? There were traumatic situations from kids having drills and going through this, which when we all went to school, we didn't have to worry about this, and I'm not in the generation of air raid drills, so I really didn't have to worry about much except a fire drill growing up. Now, obviously, and recently, it's been a much different situation. So making sure that all of our principals are on the same page as far as what the state is expecting, making sure that I'm relaying to Dr. Block and to Mrs. Steiger and Mr. Stern and all of the central office administration that we are making sure that we are up to date, because the way the state works, when the law is passed, they expect you tomorrow. That is when you're going to adhere to the law, right? So I will say I've been in multiple districts, and Livingston does do things a step above the rest as far as the level of care that we take. Our special services programs are already taking into consideration those needs that need to be met. For instance, if you have a child who is physically disabled and there's a drill or an emergency, we have to make sure that we are having a plan to get that child out to safety as well. We can't just say, every person for themselves, because we obviously have a responsibility to provide that safety for everyone and a plan for everyone. Just like on the younger grades, the example I will give you is they didn't want us to use fake blood. Now, we weren't doing that anyway, but apparently that must have happened somewhere in New Jersey, because they said you can't use fake blood in a drill because it's very traumatic for kids to be able to have to see that. So the other piece of it that was new, and I'm sure as parents of students in any public school in New Jersey, you also are expected to be notified of when a drill takes place from a security standpoint, not from a fire drill standpoint. Now the positive thing is, to Dr. Block's point, I went to 4 full-day trainings down at the Attorney General's office, and I also need to have 10 hours of continuing professional development every year. And again, it's making sure that we're leveraging all of the resources that we have in the community, and all of these fine gentlemen here who serve us, and the ladies who serve us as well, who aren't here tonight. But those people are really instrumental in really, I have to say, they kind of explain it 2 ways. There's people that run toward the danger, and there's people that run away from the danger. And thank God for these people. They run toward the danger and keep us safe. And so as far as a general sense of school security, to Dr. Block's point, it is paramount. It is something that we don't take lightly, we don't take for granted. The other frustrating part sometimes for parents is that we can't divulge our plan for every emergency operations plan, because clearly when you just put your plan out there, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that everyone then knows the plan. But there are some statistics that at least are reassuring in a sense. These things do happen. I will say New Jersey is pretty fortunate as far as the situations that haven't happened here. But with that said, they do state a statistic that 9% of outside active shooter type threats come from inside, meaning that anyone, so 9% of people that have targeted schools have no association to the school. So on the converse, 91% of people are tied somehow to a school community, which means that we should be able to identify, hopefully, the dangers that are out there. And the state is also introducing a threat assessment team, which will take place for next year, which basically the idea behind it is that we want to make sure that the person that shows up with the weapon has already made up their mind as to what they're doing. It's how do we catch the signs, how do we see what's happening before, so that we can make sure that we're having those conversations. And again, we have a wonderful group of trained professionals in risk assessments and in all sorts of different mental health capacities that are able to work with kids as we speak. We're not waiting until 2023 to put these things into place, but it's really about trying to get ahead of it so that we're not getting to the point where that person does show up disgruntled, sad, angry, mad, and ready to do harm. We want to be able to have the signs there before that we have people in the community, whether it be you as a parent that's going through your child's social media and seeing something, whether it be a teacher that's seeing something come across their desk or their Schoology, whether it be a friend that overhears something, right? It's really about that see something, say something, and that's where the education piece goes, and that's where, in the younger grades we talk about stranger danger, right? And obviously that works its way all the way up through developmentally speaking. But, I have to say, as a principal, I feel so reassured knowing that we have the support of the police department and the fire department, because obviously, we are trained as educators, they are trained as law enforcement and the people to keep us safe. And so that's where that partnership comes into play, because at the end of the day, if and when, God forbid, something were to happen, the incident response commander essentially becomes the law enforcement, right? So obviously as a principal, I might have to go around with whoever is there reporting, but it's the law enforcement that obviously takes over at that time. It's not Mr. Toomey making decisions about it. It's me basically taking the lead from the law enforcement, which is obviously what is intended, because they realize that we are there as educators, primarily speaking, and not so much as law enforcement. So I'm just looking through here. One thing that came out of our summit this summer was that training piece of it, right? We have how many employees in this district?
Almost 1,000.
Yeah, almost 1,000, right? And in 9 schools and then central office, right? We have a lot of different places. We have teachers that come and go between buildings, so we're also making sure that we're trying to standardize the procedures of what happens, so that if I share a teacher with Burnett Hill, that teacher knows what to do, whether they're at Burnett Hill or whether they're at Riker Hill. And just like if they're in the science wing at the high school versus the music area of the high school, that's, bigger than my whole building, when you think about the distance. So in the time of crisis, we want to make sure, to Dr. Block's point, that we're learning how to put the fire out while the house is not on fire, to use that analogy. But the point is, we want to make sure that we're practicing with teachers, we're practicing with kids. Detective Mullaney obviously does a great job and has seen us in action a lot in our practices and our procedures. And obviously, the state says within the first 10 days of the year, you have to have a fire drill. So the fire chief and assistant chief have scheduled time with each school to see that fire drill. The state says that within 15 days of the school year, we have to have a lockdown drill. So Detective Kevin has been busy working through, all of those dates to make sure that we're in compliance with those little tiny things. And that's really where I come into play, making sure not that I'm telling every principal how to run their building, but making sure that I'm encouraging and making sure that the things that need to be thought about are being thought about, because I don't pretend to know Livingston High School better than Principal Rosenzweig, but obviously something that we put into place, just to give you an example, is now at large events, you're going to hear a public safety announcement that just lets everyone know to take note of the nearest exit, to make sure that you are paying attention to what's happening, and that's something that we're going to be rolling out obviously as the year goes on in different events, different venues, because again, we want to make sure that this is all of our responsibility, right? Safety and security, it's everyone here's responsibility, and obviously all of you are here because you feel that way as well, and even if people aren't here, I know that they feel that way as well, but obviously we want to make sure that we're not only doing what the state expects us to do, but also what's best and what's the best practice, God forbid, we find ourselves in this situation. So the last encouraging statistic I will give is that they shared that less than 1% of schools nationwide will ever experience the worst case scenario, and I don't even want to say it, which is, you don't want to ever be in that 1%, but as they said, you want to make sure that if you are in that 1%, you are prepared and ready and equipped to make sure that we can make the best decisions at that time, God forbid something should happen. So, you're welcome to reach out to your building principal with any specifics, questions. Now, I will say some general things I get questions about. Are our doors locked? Yes, our doors are locked. We can only get into certain access points with our ID badges. Our office staff is trained to screen to screen anyone that needs to come into the building, and we encourage a lot of them to have appointments, because we want to make sure that we know, but obviously we recognize the fact that we have your most prized possessions in our care, and we thank you for that trust, and we're always, no matter how good we might be at doing something, we're always going to continue to improve and to reflect on the practices that we have in accordance with making sure we're following what the state of New Jersey expects us to do as well, and partnering with our experts who are in the front row tonight in our law enforcement. So thank you again, Dr. Black, for the opportunity, and I'm grateful to work alongside such an amazing team. And if there's any questions as the event goes on, I'm obviously going to be here, so you can direct them my way.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Toomey. Good job. And there will be lots of time for questions. But just before I get off this slide, that's not the slide. Oh, you got it? These are some of the ways that this particular office does help us besides the training of Mr. Toomey. Our district has a comprehensive security plan that is updated annually, that is also submitted to the OSPEP. We actually did involve them and bring them in for an audit just before the pandemic, and they went to different schools with us, rang the doorbells, really put our office staff and our teachers to the test, had us do drills in front of them, and it was really a positive experience. They gave us a lot of really good feedback. They also provide professional development and provide us with research and information on best practices. Okay, what we know is that safety and security are always our top priority. Creating a school and community culture in which we know our students and families will follow, and their families follow up on concerning behavior is paramount. Justin touched on that a little bit. And I know the chief and I have talked about this before, that the best way to keep our schools secure is by prevention and proactivity. So knowing that we know our students and families, all the research has shown that there are some telltale behaviors and telltale signs. There's been with the tragedies that have happened around the country, there have been signs and warnings, and so looking at social media, knowing our kids and families, being proactive, we know how important that is. Supporting our students as they experience troubling events in and out of school. We communicate. A lot of the times the police will know things that are happening with our families in town. They share that with us, that not the specifics of it, but just to let us know that a kid may be having a difficult time and that we should look out for that. And at the same time, if we see a student with certain behaviors, we may reach out to the police department like that. Parents, you all have a role too. Parents, family members, and friends need to be full participants in prevention. So us connecting with parents and you connecting with us, if you know something that's going on with either your child, or if you want to report something that's going on with a group of students, or you see something that you think we should know about, reporting those things is really important. So I touched on this a little bit, but much gets shared on the internet and social media. So if we see, we encourage you. We've had people call and say, I saw this statement on social media, I'm really sorry to bother you with it. No, please call us, depending on what the topic is or what the statement is. Call us, call the police, reach out. It's important for us to know what's going on because as Justin alluded to, the more studies that come out on things that happen in schools, the more it shows that these things had warning signs and could have been prevented. So us being proactive and working together and communicating with each other is of top importance. So that's what I would say about that. And what we can share, we're going to do some question and answer. We can share anything with one another. The police to us, and the fire department to us. We do that regularly. As Justin Toomey alluded to, there are some things we may say tonight. We can't get into detail about that. Please be patient with us when we do that. It's not that we're trying to hide anything from you. It's part of the business of security, is making sure information that shouldn't be out in the open is not out in the open, but we will try to share as much as we can. As I've said before, the Livingston Police Department and Fire Department know our schools and are in them regularly, and we appreciate that. Again, we don't share details of emergency plans publicly, and we will speak about them in a general fashion. As I talked about, police and fire departments are involved in a proactive and active approach to keeping our schools safe, and there are no 100% to school security. That's why these discussions are ongoing, and you will hear that we continue to have discussions. The research, the look back on previous incidents, the new information that comes to light, it is an ongoing process. But we do know that making sure we know our students, making sure that we take care of them, particularly when they're having mental health issues, or showing signs of that, is really very important. And I think I'm gonna, next slide. We're gonna skip this slide, and we'll bring up the police and fire in just a minute. And we'll go to the next slide. And we will sort of end our presentation portion of the evening talking about something which was all we were talking about 2.5 years ago, which was cybersecurity. Those of you who had students in the district on November 22nd, 2019 may remember that we had a ransomware incident here in Livingston. And since then, we have had the benefit of having Mrs. Teresa Raymond join us as our Director of Technology, and she's going to talk a little bit about what we've done to make ourselves secure digitally.
Good evening, everyone. So one of the things that I started to do when I first got here was look at the cybersecurity posture of the district. The education sector, along with a lot of other industries, have been negatively impacted, particularly the last 5 years. They are a target usually because they lack resources such as personnel and tools to really be effective with preventing cybersecurity attacks. So over the past 2 years, what we have done is we've looked at our posture and also looked at the requirements of what it takes now to get cybersecurity insurance, and we've put a lot of tools and policies in place. And some of those things are DNS filtering, which is just a more advanced way of blocking like malicious websites and downloads that students or staff might happen upon as they're browsing on the internet. We have a more advanced endpoint detection system to kind of trigger those alerts if somebody does download something accidentally. And then we have a better backup system. So backups are critical in being able to recover if you do. It's not a matter of, we've talked about this before with cybersecurity attacks. It's not, you can prevent them only so much. But what you want to do is make sure you're resilient and you can recover quickly if you do have an attack. And so being able to have a robust backup system, which is something that we've implemented last school year. And what's nice about this particular system is instead of usually it's once a day that you do a backup, this is every few hours. So it's constantly backing up our data so that if at any point in time something happened, we'd be able to recover a little bit better. And then one of the other things that we started doing was off-site copies of backups. Because usually in these types of attacks, they'll go after your backup system. So having that off-site backup will also help us recover. And then a couple of other things that we've implemented is something called Ddos Protection. So what that is is one of the types of attacks that these malicious actors will do is try to just flood your network with requests, which will prevent you from doing anything productive on your network. And so we have a service in place that we purchase that will help prevent those attacks. And then we also have some systems that actually you can access from the outside. So we do monthly external vulnerability scans to see if there's anything exposed on those particular systems, and we're alerted, and then we work on correcting and patching those systems. One of the other things that's really important is you want, to make sure that not everyone has administrative rights. Everyone wants administrative rights to their devices, but one of the downsides to that, unfortunately, is that's how things can get into the network. So even our technicians have very limited rights. So we use a system called a privileged access manager. So it's kind of like a just-in-time access. So if they need to do something that requires administrative credentials, this system will give them temporary access, and then when they're done, it closes that access, and each time they do it, it's a different account. So it's never the same account. So if ever one got compromised, it wouldn't be able to be used again. We also have an auditing tool. The auditing tool allows us to be alerted if accounts are created without our knowledge, which is usually one of the first things that happens is somebody either creates an administrator account or takes a regular user that they've compromised their credentials and tries to elevate them to an administrator user. We have one of the big ones that we just did this past May was multi-factor authentication for all staff. So the staff was great, very receptive for being able to implement this because it was a big change. We have it on a lot of systems. We have it on our systems that hold confidential data, such as our student information system. We have it on systems that could be compromised easily, like our email system. And so this is just another layer of security to help prevent anything from being compromised. And one of the other things we started to do was more cybersecurity awareness training, which is a requirement that we do for the cybersecurity insurance. But one of the things we did was phishing campaigns. So phishing is one of it's an email usually with a malicious link or a malicious attachment that somebody clicks on. Some of them are very easy, very deceptive, so they look real. And so part of these phishing campaigns, the goal is to teach the teachers what they look like and how tricky they can be. So it's not meant to ever be a gotcha. It's kind of, these are the things to look out for. And we always encourage staff to, if you're not expecting something, don't click on the link or click on the attachment. And there has been a great improvement. In our first campaign, we actually only had 8% of users. And that was really a good place to be. Some of the things that we're doing that are upcoming, we are actually going to be outsourcing some cybersecurity monitoring and threat hunting. So cybersecurity tools are very expensive, and not only do you have to purchase the tools, but you have to have the personnel to be able to monitor and manage those tools. For a school district, something like that is usually very expensive. So we have a vendor that we'll be working with. Well, they'll actually be doing the proactive monitoring. So instead of us always being reactive when we get an alert, they're actually going to be actively looking for things in our network so that we can be more preventative. And then we're getting a next generation firewall so that we can have more advanced intrusion and detection features on that. Another advanced email security program, so stuff still gets through, but this is another layer to kind of help prevent even more from getting through. And then additional cybersecurity awareness training through a video program that we're using with staff. So we've done a lot over the last couple of years, and we keep doing a little bit at a time. Staff and students have been great and receptive to everything that we've done. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Teresa. We have come quite a distance through a pandemic, no less, under Teresa's leadership, and really shoring up and adding a lot of new security layers, which is not only protects us and the district, but it's good for you all to know because your children are on those devices a lot, and their information is obviously something that is protected because of the things that have been put in place as well. So I'm gonna, I guess, invite up our police folks and our fire folks, and we'll invite Justin back up, and we'll grab stools and chairs, and I guess I'll play host. I'll be the Phil Donahue. Mr. Stern has volunteered to be Phil Donahue.
For those of you who remember. Questions?
Hi, my name is David. I have 2 little rascals at Collins. First of all, thank you, all of you guys, by the way. My kids are 3rd or 4th year going in the school district, and it's absolutely lovely. You guys do a tremendous job with COVID. I know not many people give you guys compliments, but thank you for that. It's a really great school system, and I know the rankings show that, so appreciate that. Secondly, my biggest concern is I grew up in South Florida by Parkland, and was a rival high school at the time. And my biggest concern is that there's not police officers on the school grounds. When I was growing up, going through high school, I always had a police resource officer there that was either a retired police officer or on-duty police officer, and it seems that every time I ask this question, I know Ms. Sybil has been very good with it, but there's no resources to put an officer in the school, and I know that everything I've read about the situation is if there's something that's going against that student or that person that's going into the school, that if they gives them a second thought to go in there that they're going to be challenged, they tend not to. And the second question to that is, even if they can't do the officer at the school, if they can put some type of police vehicle, fire truck, or something that's just on the grounds that might put a second guess in that I shouldn't say children, but in that person's mind, to not do it. I think that's something that is very important for me, is something like that needs to be there. And just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, and if there's any plans to do that, and why not, if so.
My name is Gary Marshall, I'm the police chief here. I've been doing this since I was 20 years old. I'm not 20 anymore. So I'm not sure I know how to do anything else other than to protect Livingston, but I'd like to think I do that well. Our officers are in the schools, but not full-time, right? So it's a philosophy. I took over as chief about 4 years ago now, and quickly we saw that schools were under attack throughout the country, and also houses of worship. Right, so we knew at that point, when I say we, I mean myself and the 2 captains, we got promoted at the same time, and Captain Drum had to leave to handle the situation, so the other captain unfortunately had to leave. But we knew early on in our tenure that we were going to be, it's all going to be about schools and houses of worship. And so we take it very serious, and it starts from the top down. I like to think that we lead by example. So you'll see myself and the captains throughout our day doing a school walkthrough or security check. So to say that there's no police officers in the schools is not really fair, because all of our officers from the chief.
I mean full-time, right?
Yeah, full-time. So you're 100% correct. I mean, we don't have full-time law enforcement officers in the school. There are security people, personnel into the school. But those are decisions that are made at the school board. We work very closely with the school board, and we certainly respect their decisions. And if a point in time comes in the future where that is something that is necessary, then certainly we'll discuss that. But
is there a reason why they haven't yet, if it's the school board?
Well, we've had we have 7, I believe it's 7 now, full-time security, what we have as security officers in the schools. Many of them, if not all of them, many of them are either are retired police officers, former police officers, and they have done a great job in terms of one, helping us in terms of the flow in and out of buildings, They've also done a great job getting to know the kids. A lot of times, we talked about the importance of being proactive and reporting. They know the kids well enough that they do a lot of reporting to the principals and to the counselors as far as kids that are struggling with different things. They know the schools, they know the buildings, they have good training behind them, and we've just found that to be successful to this point. We're happy with the staff that we have and believe that they're filling the role that we need them to fill.
Are they armed by chance?
They are not at this time.
Yes. So I just want to follow through with that question. I'm curious if you have scenario played out, based on like the recent events that have happened in schools. What happened? Would that, God forbid, happen here in our schools? How would the personnel have responded? Do they have adequate training to obviously minimize casualties, because at that point it's too late already? I just love your thoughts and perspective on that, and then also perhaps a few words on just the security that you have in place presently. How does that prevent someone who is not mentally stable from coming into school and causing harm?
So, I'll start real fast on, I know the chief and I have had conversations, and bless you, and we had conversations after the incident, particularly that happened in the spring, and, I know that having the police officers who are in our building so often would make a big difference, and two, and I don't want to reveal too much, so I'm going to throw it to the chief faster than I thought it was. But he and I have talked a lot about response time and the ability for the Livingston Police Department to respond if there was an emergency like that. And with that, I will.
So obviously training is very important, something we take very seriously. Also communication. And so we're always communicating with our key partners who are all in the room here tonight. And when I tell you our relationship is almost personal at this point, that's how often we meet throughout the year and during the summer months as well. So training is important to us. Our equipment, we always make sure that we have the proper equipment, and communication. That's the key to success. And the communication also with the security officers, them being retired law enforcement officers, a lot of them are recently retired from the Livingston Police Department and have that direct communication with us as well. So we're communicating at all different levels of our agency, but also all different levels of the school as well. From the board to the super, all the way down to the principals and the teachers and the security staff, and also within my organization as well, the detectives, the patrol officers, the patrol supervisors, up all the way through the captains, and Dr. Block and I also have no problem calling each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the communication is key. It's very important. So I think I lost track of the question. But as far as the incidents that are happening throughout the country, obviously, we're all parents ourselves, most of us in the police department. So we take it personal. We see this. We're not desensitized by any stretch of imagination because we're parents ourselves. So we study them. We have an emergency response unit that is studying it from one level. Our command staff is studying it from one level. But the average citizen of New Jersey doesn't realize how much structure and hierarchy we have in law enforcement in New Jersey versus a lot of the other states that you see. So I think if you're asking me whether there's a disconnect between what you're seeing on national news versus what actually we have in place in New Jersey, you're just going to have to trust me that we are far advanced than most of what you're seeing in other states as well. So we have clear hierarchy and structure and command staff and training and mandates And, but also we're humble enough in our agency, myself and the two captains, that we also are not, you know, we're not elected law enforcement, we're full-time law enforcement. So we're also humble enough that we listen to our own professionals as well. And we always are looking to improve ourselves, and we're always breaking down every incident. God forbid the unthinkable should happen here.
Thank you so much.
Want to say something, Chris?
I was just to add from, and I'm sure we're probably gonna say the same thing, from a school level, right? That's why, you know, we are practicing what we're practicing. That's why the training is happening. You know, that's why the office staff, we're sitting down with and talking to them about the types of questions to ask when someone's trying to push the bell, you know, or the ringer to get in. You know, that's why we're empowering our staff that in the unlikely event that something were to happen, that they're ready to essentially put the building into a lockdown, not just because they always think the principal is going to be the one calling the lockdown. And quite honestly, I always, you know, I say they're probably coming after, you know, me first, just because that's the, you know, I'm closest to the front of the building, and not to make light of it, but that's just the reality of it, where the whole idea in general, and even through the training, and obviously the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, and I think you mentioned, it's really about minimizing, right? Minimizing at that point the casualties, and so that's why, you know, I'll give you an example. If there's people in, if there's someone in the hallway, right? A teacher's not unlocking the classroom door to let them in at that point, you know, and that sounds really terrible when you think about that, right? But that's where it's like, you know, go into the nearest, the room that's still like, you know, getting closed. We teach kids what to do in the bathroom, right? If they're in the bathroom, we tell them, don't come out of the bathroom, you know, and what to do in the bathroom, you know, and there's signs posted in there too. So while we obviously want to hope that nothing like this ever happens, especially here, you know, we're taking those steps on our end, you know, to make sure that, God forbid, we've gotten through all of the things that were already shared and the person still shows up, that we pretty much within an instant's notice can, you know, can shut the building down, you know, in seconds. And I want to kind of pass it to Detective Mullaney, since he gets to see all the drills every single month, you know, which is something else doesn't always happen in a lot of communities. Usually the state requires that the police, the law enforcement officials at one drill a year. Here we do it every single month for 10 months of the school year, and in the summer months in the ESY and the enrichment programs, because the rule is any building with kids in it, we have to be practicing these types of drills.
So I think you asked a great question, sir. I mean, we do a ton of training at the schools, and I'm there personally in every single school at least once a month. And just today alone, I was at your kid's school at Collins. I met with Principal Sabula after they conducted a lockdown, and the lockdown drill included the teachers, the students, and everybody collaborating and saying, hey, if something happens, you know, how do we respond? So after that lockdown drill, which I have to add, and I promised Superintendent Block didn't pay me to say this, it was perfect. I mean, it was a flawless, impeccable lockdown drill. I was really impressed with it. I then sat down with Principal Sabula, and then we talked about, hey, here are some maybe changes and updates to school security this year. Here are some things that we're looking at. Here's why. And then about an hour later, I went to Mount Pleasant Elementary School, and that type of training was at a faculty meeting. It was more, I guess, cognitive for the teachers, and you know, I walked them through a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint actually included some of the more, you know, recent active shooter events. And you know, I'll go into Uvalde, or I'll go into Parkland, and what I'll say to them is, we're not going over this to beat up what happened there. We're going over it to say, what can we as a Livingston community learn, and what were some mistakes? Hey, that door was propped, or that door couldn't lock, and these are all things that we're looking at. And then I also want to add, you know, we also do specialized school security training as a police department, and the Livingston School District has been nice enough, at least on a yearly basis, to actually lend us one of their schools, and we will then have, you know, training in the schools. And the number one thing that I tell the teachers, and that Chief Marshall will tell you here tonight, is, God forbid there's an emergency in Livingston, the police are coming in the building, okay? You're not gonna see a situation like you see in other areas of the country. I mean, we're coming in the building, and our goal as the police is to take the attention off from the shooter, off of the teachers and the students, and put that attention onto us.
Thank you.
Can you explain what the procedures currently are for anyone who is not a student or a teacher who comes to any of our schools during the day now, and their ability to get into a building just based on your normal procedures in the school? It's changed over the years. My kids are in high school now, and it's been different at, you know, different schools. So if anyone comes, whether through it's the front doors of the building or any other door, what in the normal course of the school procedures should be happening now?
Great question, and and I think it's also from the education piece. It helps parents who are coming to a building kind of know this doesn't look great, or this doesn't pass the smell test. So really, generally speaking, and each school is a little different. Typically, visitors are going to one access point, right, where there's a camera, they're being screened, and really the idea is, we want to let them in when there's a reason to let them in, but after a series of questions, and Dr. Block had kind of alluded to when the state had come a couple of years ago to do an audit, they try to get in and they try to see who will let them in, except it's practice. The office doesn't know it's practice. And so essentially, in an elementary level, our office staff is screening people and asking, what child's what's your teacher's name, right? What's the child's name? Some personal questions that, yes, could anyone know that Johnny has Mrs. Smith, in second grade? Perhaps, right? But a lot of the questions that we get to ask are more personal. The other thing I will say, especially in the elementary world, is we get to see a lot of faces that we become familiar with, and I know we have a head secretary here, not to put her on the spot, but you know the people, the faces. But even with that said, no one's coming in the building unless they're passing a certain level of screening questions, and then generally speaking, they're being intercepted by someone that's then greeting them in the building. So that, like, for instance, I'll give you my building as an example. You can walk in and you could go this way or you could go this way. The office is this way, so there's someone from the office staff coming out, to greet them as they're getting buzzed in, to make sure that they are someone who, should be going the right way. Not to mention, not that they're necessarily there to do harm, but we also don't want someone just wandering down the hallway, and just trying to peek in to see what their child's doing in the classroom. And then the other piece of it too is that, it's really that education piece of, we'll tell parents all the time, while it's great to hold the door for someone, we do not want you holding the door for anyone. It feels really rude, but you need to make sure that no one's coming in behind you. And that's something that we're constantly reminding, because of course it's rude to let a door slam in someone's face. But in this case, we don't, want them coming in. The other thing is we're trying to limit the access. So for instance, for something that, I'll use my school as an example, COVID brought the bin outside where people could leave things. So honestly, I don't have a lot of people that are just bringing a lunch bag to come in the building anymore, which is the less chances that we need to be opening the door. It's easier for the parent. They ring the bell, they say this is so-and-so's lunch, and then someone will go out to get it from them. So we're also looking at those ways where we can try to, because we want to be welcoming, and years ago you could just walk in the front doors of a school. Unfortunately, those days are long gone, and we really only want people to have to come in the building who have to come in the building. Now I understand that with 450 or 500 kids, it's easier to manage, than the high school situation, but I know the high school also has, and I don't want to speak for them, there's other levels in place, and this is where I'm going to toss it to you, and there's more steps in place even at the high school.
Yeah, I can just speak to the high school, since you had mentioned the high school. So we have a rotation of our security officers. One is always at the front during school hours. So that is the only point of access. And similarly to what Mr. Toomey was stating, we actually don't even unlock the front door unless there is an appointment or a reason or whatever the case may be. So after a series of questioning, you'll be welcomed in, and even at that point, you're kind of locked into the lobby area. If there's an appointment, a teacher or a counselor will come greet a parent and bring them back, vice versa. We don't want people roaming throughout the hallway. It's a big place and there's a lot of places to go, so we want to make sure that they know where they're supposed to be. But while we want to be welcoming to our parents and visitors, there's a time and a place for that, and during the school day, we try to minimize it to the extent possible.
Can you address what happens at lunch when the seniors and juniors can leave? Obviously, there's kids coming and going and entering. So what's the security procedure at that point? And then also, there's a ton of after-school activities that go on at the high school, and there's events such as tonight where the community comes into our school buildings. And as a parent, I've seen my kids now go from kindergarten to 12, and I gotta say, I've honestly been amazed at how lax security has been at community events. And I'm not talking necessarily this year, but I remember going to elementary school back to school nights and thinking to myself, oh my God, any person off the street could walk into this building go into a classroom, leave something in the classroom, and it just always blew my mind. So I guess I just would throw it back to all of you too, you know, when it's not the school day and a community is coming in, are you still being as vigilant in, you know, paying attention to who's coming into the building and making sure that anyone isn't walking into a classroom that shouldn't be during events like this? So, I mean, I have a number of things, but they're all on my mind.
I can address the lunch, and then I can toss it back to you for the after-school stuff. So at the high school, seniors currently have open lunch. There's a very detailed process for what that looks like. There are only specified doors in which they can leave from, and when they do, there are adults standing at that door. And then there's one door that they can come back from, which is the front door, also at which there are a number of administrators and security officers standing at the door, making sure that it's only students that are coming, we actually have people stationed outside and inside. So it's you know, we're vigilant because, to your point, we want to make sure that only the people that should be coming back come back. And there are other steps to the process that I won't necessarily go into, but we are very careful about who goes out and who comes in throughout the course of the day.
The other thing I could touch on is after school. Any event that the schools run or if someone rents the building out, we as a fire department, we have to come do an inspection. We walk the buildings, you know, we walk, this is always the number one place because it's the biggest one. They have the place, we check all the exit doors, we check any of the lockers that you see. Well, Chief, and then this week they're supposed to be secured. Any unused locker now is secured. By the end of this week, after the first week of school, you know, we don't want anything left in certain lockers. We do that. If you do come in here, you might see that some gates are put up. We only use the exits around here that's required for egress. We don't let anyone roam through the building anymore. The fire code is very strict, but we had to kind of revamp the fire code to work with the lockdowns, and that's going against a lot of the things we used to believe. But we're all working together, you know. But you know, I can assure you, my kids went through the school system. I'm anal when it comes to safety. So, the one thing I will tell you, and I shared it with the group over the summer, I went on 2 fire alarms in two different houses. I'm searching the house. I said to the homeowner, "Why is this door locked? I can't get in because I don't have the key to that. That's my kid's room." Okay, that's a red flag right there. If my son and my daughter would have locked the door, I would have kicked the door off, it would have been removed, and they won't have a door anymore. So you got the parents, it starts at the house. I know it's hard, these are your children, they're your prized possession. But if you think they're doing something and that door's locked, get in there and see what they're doing. Because it starts from you, and we don't want it to end here. You know, I know, you know, I know what you were saying about, you know, with the police not going in Texas. They chose to do, to hold back a little. You know, I know that isn't going to happen here. If they had an active shooter, we're going to be dispatched, but we're not going to come here. We're going to be staging somewhere else. Okay, because one of the first things they tell you, as soon as the first responders get here, they're looking to take out the first responders. So if we all come running in and we're dead, we're not going to help you. So you might, if you see that, it's there strategically. You know, again, I'm not saying what they did in Texas was right.
If you want me to address the Texas incident, so just like the Texas incident, just like every incident, we break it down internally. Our ESU team goes over, our command staff goes over. Right away, I mean, obviously I don't have first-hand information. I'm not doing the incident investigation on that. But from what we see as professionals is that there's a breakdown in the command staff. You can't blame the officers. The officers, it seems on face value that the officers wanted to do their job there. And we don't see that as being a problem here. Again, like I was talking to you before, New Jersey has a hierarchy, we have a structure, and we're prepared to make those decisions. And my guess is, and this is an assumption, my guess is that they got caught between an active shooter situation and what the command staff believed was turning into a barricaded suspect situation. I'm getting a little technical, but that was clearly still an active shooter situation. And I think at some point in time they were a little outgunned, so to speak, when they first arrived. Well, thanks to our governing body here, our council, our manager, and some donations from private citizens as well, we have the equipment that we feel that we need to get in and do that job correctly. So it comes down, for us, it comes down to communication, equipment, and training. And so we're training each officer from the, a brand new road supervisor to go in there and handle an active shooter situation and neutralize it as fast as possible. And the one thing we didn't touch on in Livingston is that our response time is fantastic. So that's another thing, right? You look on the news and you see schools have to have resource officers and have to have officers in the school. Well, you don't know how far that school is from the local law enforcement. So the one benefit we have in Livingston is that all of our schools, right? But I'm responsible for public and private schools as well. So if I say anything, I'm kind of speaking about all schools. But we're centrally located. We have officers that are deployed throughout the school day, and they're all within a very close distance to every school that's in town. So the response time, again, could be very different than what you're seeing in Texas or whatever, which may make the need for officers on campus, more important. But our response time could negate that, really, that need.
Chief, if I could weigh in quickly, I'd just like to assure everyone as well that the Livingston Police Department trains in the most realistic way we know how and put our officers through a decision-making process the most realistic way we know how. And I'm being purposely vague here. Bare minimum once a year for everybody. And a good portion of the officers do that far more than once a year.
Are you guys working with other towns, like just knowing that it's a small town, obviously, and like it's a bigger response? I don't know how many officers are in Livingston. Are you guys working with other surrounding towns to also address, like, if something was to happen?
Right. Well, we have a great relationship with the surrounding contiguous towns. Obviously, we have a chief, from different levels. I belong to 3 different chiefs associations. So I'm always networking with other chiefs, and again, from a command staff perspective, my role in an incident is going to be much different, right? So I'm always preparing our command staff, but then we have an ESU team that's training. The next couple of days, they're training with other teams unit. They're training with the teams unit of the New Jersey State Police all the time. So at different levels, Detective Mulaney is discussing this, and again, they're following protocol from the state level. So we take a lot of our directives and policies from the state level as well. We're dealing with the Attorney General's office. We're dealing with the Department of Education as well. And listen, I pride myself on being a very active police chief. And the other day, there was an incident down in Hoboken. I'm very good friends with the police chief in Stevens Institute of Technology. He lives in Livingston. So I heard that his school went on lockdown because in Hoboken they had a barricaded suspect with a rifle in one block off the campus. So the entire school went into lockdown. I hopped into my car and spent 2.5 hours down there in the command building or post. They had a mobile command post. So I spent 2.5 hours in a mobile command post. They let me in there because they knew me because I'm networking. But a week or 2 weeks ago, firsthand for me, I was hands-on with a barricaded suspect with a rifle when Stevens was on full lockdown.
Thank you. I too want to thank all of you for everything you do for the community and our children every day. It's a really sincere thank you. I also thank you for having this discussion tonight. I'm surprised it's not standing room only in here.
100%.
I can't believe how few parents are here tonight. I'm sure there'd be more if, the circumstances were a little different, but it's very telling. Anyway, thank you for holding the discussion. I'm going to piggyback on the question about a police officer presence at the schools, even if it's just as a deterrent. I mean, it sounds like obviously you're doing all the training in the world, but I always flash back to the video of that father from Parkland who lost his child, who's sitting there saying, if you don't think this could never happen in your town, think again. Because if we can go back a day or a week, we would do things very, very differently. So, it sounded to me like the answer to the question that that gentleman had was that, it's not a law enforcement decision to put those, an armed officer present at the schools at the point of entry. It's a school board decision. And Dr. Block, right?
Yeah.
You said that you felt you had 7 unarmed but well-trained security officers, and that was enough. And I can't help but think that if something were to happen here, and you have to figure it will, you can't figure God forbid, worst case scenario, you have to operate like it's going to happen, right? So that you're looking at it from that perspective. I wonder if the next day you'd say, maybe 7 unarmed security officers wasn't enough. Maybe we should have done more because now we're dealing with real, true fallout and casualties, God forbid, of our children. So what is the reason why the school board would not say, you know what, we're in a town where we spend tens of millions of dollars, for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's the right thing, we spend tens of millions of dollars a year as a community on our kids' birthday parties. You know what I mean? Why are we putting, why are we taking this extra step, having that extra level of security, even if it's just a deterrent and a physical presence or a visual presence? So why would the school board not go that extra level?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Seth Cohen, I'm president of the Board of Ed. So I just want to offer a point of correction. It is actually not the Board of Ed who makes that decision. We take the recommendations across from everyone, and then approvals come to us, but no approval for that or request for approval has ever come to the board, at least in my time on the board. But it is not our decision. We do not make that decision.
As a community, if we want to understand, you know what, we think it should happen, and we think that, if we have to pony up for it, or we have to do whatever it takes to make it happen, if it's a budgetary decision, or if it's an actual tactical, we found through research that it actually makes the problem worse instead of better. We'd like to know that. But what's the process, and how do we go about trying to score?
So both things. So Seth is right that unless I make a recommendation to the board doesn't get to vote on having the actual police officers in the schools. So like the chief said, he meets with a lot of police chief organizations. Superintendents and school districts talk a lot, and we meet with the Office of Emergency Management from the state, and there's no strong recommendation right now of having an armed officer in the school. From all of the research and the data that I have seen, it is shown that having an armed officer is neither a deterrent nor has it been in the situations that have occurred something that has been able to intervene in any sort of way that, it's hard to measure whether you've minimized casualties by a certain number, because how does anyone ever know? But there have been certainly school shootings in schools that have had armed school resource officers. And I think that when I talk to the chief and when we talk about response times, and we talk about the overall presence that they have in our buildings, and I see the overall presence they have in our buildings, and I see the training that our folks get, and how yes, we could always add things. We could add metal detectors. We could add surveillance people around the school. We could have somebody standing outside every classroom. There's things we could do. We make decisions as to which resources we think are necessary, which resources we think will be most productive in keeping our kids safe. We think about the overall atmosphere and feeling of our schools and how that compares. And all of those things have caused us at this point not to recommend that we have armed officers in our buildings.
And I just, obviously I want to apologize to the board because I misspoke. It didn't come out exactly the way I intended it to come out. So certainly, I don't know, I don't want to say that I'm an expert on the inner workings of the board and their hierarchy.
But the conversation is ongoing. But what has been presented to me again at superintendent roundtables, at security trainings that I've been to, and things that have been sent to me about school security is that that is not necessarily a high effect. It makes what it actually says is it can make people feel better, but where actually armed school resource officers have been the most effective in preventing school shootings have been in their proactive approach to knowing students and being in the buildings and having their ears to the ground and reporting things to administration and reporting things to counselors and nipping things in the bud in advance, which I personally believe is the number one thing that we need to do to keep our schools safe. Because to say it inelegantly, if somebody shows up here with the proper equipment, where no matter what equipment we have or how many people we have standing in their way, it's probably too late. So where the school resource officers have been really effective is in their proactive contributions, and our officers who are here are able to make those contributions without carrying a firearm. So that's why we are where we are on the issue.
There's a psychological component too, of course. You know, when I talk to my kids, every time there's another incident around the country, they're more and more concerned about this, and you know, they start mentioning it. You can tell it's on our kids' minds.
Absolutely.
More now than it ever has been.
100%.
To the point where they feel a little unsafe coming to school in the days after these incidents. And I hear them say, we don't even have a police officer outside. Like, they're saying they don't feel safe because they don't have it. So I'm hearing that for them. But I would bet that if you go to any town that has been unfortunate enough to have a school shooting, I'm sure that they now have more than unarmed because they've been there. And would that be an accurate statement, Chief? I'm sure Parkland has armed, police officer presence in the schools.
I don't have any data on it, but I would probably say there's still less schools that actually have armed law enforcement. But certainly you're seeing a trend moving towards it.
And I see it in South Florida around Parkland. They're passing bills, they're raising budgets, they're going in that direction.
To be fair,
hold on a second. I want to give a chance here in the back.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So I'm a teacher at a temple, and we have a lot of cameras throughout the building, inside and outside, and also screen TV monitors that are very visible to everybody with all the camera pictures. Is that something that we talk a lot about our buildings? Are there cameras and visibility to those? Those are great deterrents, I think, and as well, we can all see if there's been a door propped open or left ajar, so we can kind of eliminate it.
Yeah, sure. So the short answer to that is yes, absolutely. Livingston School District shares their computer. They gave us a computer surveillance, so not only do they have the surveillance system, but so does the police department. Obviously, we're not sitting there watching it in real time for no reason, but God forbid there's an emergency, it is something that we can access, and we do access.
And they've also increased the number of cameras that are in the buildings in the last few years too, and all of the office staff has full screen views of all the different camera angles, and there's times where we're getting to rewatch footage not for anything related to that, but just to be able to see every corner of the building and any space that we would need to see. But that's definitely something that I can say. I've worked in several districts and I've never had as many angles of a school that I've had in my building here. And honestly, they're on all the time, and our office staff. I mean, I hate to say it, everyone's heightened sensitivity to this, right? I mean, because just like everyone cares about their kids, we also want to send moms and dads and aunts and uncles back home to their families that are coming to work, to school each day as well. No one goes into the building, ourselves included, saying, this is going to be our last day, on this planet, and so I think that there's definitely an awareness and a heightened sensitivity to it, and I can speak to, the offices, the cameras are on all the time, and there are outside cameras as well. There's also feeds to our buildings and grounds department in the district, and then obviously in addition to the police department. So there's a lot of eyes on different, different views in a very safe, technological way, wherever Miss Raymond is, so no one can hack into those video feeds, right? But I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of eyes, and we'll see it because there's things where after school hours, if there's a playground that has something that happens to it, right? We can look at a camera and see who was it. There's times where there's kids that might be older kids coming to an elementary school, and then you show it to one of the secondary principals, and they're like, oh, I know those kids, right? So there's a lot of communication and collaboration, because obviously the more information we have, the more we can do to communicate with those kids, but also with their families as well.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, thank you everybody. Such kind of open, healthy discussions help build a stronger community, and it gives us a lot of assurance as well, even though we all may not have the right answers today, but thank you again. I have 3 questions, so please bear with me. I'll try to make it brief. My first question, while we are discussing about having an armed security person in the school, I understand those decisions cannot happen right away. There's a process and flow to it. In the interim, there are activities like back to school night, for example. There are activities like family picnics. There are things like that. At least for those specific instances, is there a reason why we cannot have armed personnel available outside? For example, during last years when we had the picnics in schools, right? Everybody is out there, the children are out there, they are playing, the families are there, we are all having a great time. I understand that, but with all of things happening in these unprecedented times, would it be okay to have an armed personnel, at least for those instances? Who would make that decision? Or again, this is a thought, right, that's come up. While we cannot do everything, but there are little things that we can do step by step.
I can tell you one thing I do. Whenever there's a large event in the school, all right, the first thing I do is I call him. And then I say, look, we got 500-600 people in the school. Can you send the district cars to keep a periodic check? Just because, for the sole purpose, 500-600 people that don't know the layout of the building, and it goes to what you were saying about talking and showing the exits, and and I'm not being racist by any means, but we have a huge Indian population, we have a huge Chinese population. I don't speak it. Or Asian.
That's fine, but I'm talking about the
what
kids.
I'm saying is, we need, we need groups. We got to get a group together. From every
maybe we
culture.
don't have an answer for this right now, but maybe something that you can think about, please, because these are important activities that happen in the school, and there are 500 kids who hopefully all speak English at that point, because they'll be going in that specific school district.
So we try to create, obviously, law enforcement, right? This philosophy has been going on for 100 years, right? We try to create an omnipresence. We want to be a deterrent, right? Our goal is to, we hope it never happens anywhere, right? But we certainly don't want it to happen in Livingston, right? That's our goal. So we want to be deterrent. So we try to create an omnipresence and have law enforcement as much as we can, as visible as we can. We also have unmarked detectives around too, and we make sure Dr. Block and I discuss that all the time, because we have
All I'm saying is everything's published online, from back to school nights, to picnics, to things like that. Having armed personnel
and that's what I was going to get to. So if we have events in town, we have a folder. We're constantly deploying resources to major events as well. And all you have to do is request, and you'll get law enforcement. And if it's something that's an hour, 2 hours, we have officers, we call it a detail, what's a term for it? There's a term for it, but we have officers that just go out and they'll get out of the car and they'll be present at these events. If we know about it, you'll get a law enforcement response. If it's a longer event, we give the option to the event organizer to hire an officer, and then that officer would be dedicated to you if it was an event organizer that's outside the scope of the school, then we would, and it was a long in duration event, we would have them we would recommend that they hire an officer for their event.
So should we ask the principal, who should I place a request to, that in order to be more comfortable to have somebody around there in an activity like this? How would you guide me? What should I do? If I'm looking for an answer, for example.
It's a reoccurring event. I mean,
yeah, like the back to school nights, right? For example.
So I can share so we get security opportunities that the district provides us. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 2 events a year the district will provide us, and back to school, and that's usually one of them, especially for the elementary schools. I can speak to at least my own HSA. When there's additional security, they're willing to then foot the bill, and then they pay whatever that rate is. So that basically is a conversation where I'll have with my HSA, and we'll say, this is an event, like TREPS, for instance, right? It's outside, there's a lot of people, and so then honestly, and we work with Ms. McLaughlin in central office, and then we find security. I can't speak to whether we get armed or unarmed, but generally they do reach out to the police department, but we always have a security presence at these events, and it's really just a request through the communication with the HSA and with us, and then with obviously central office.
So the principal and the PT, I can work with them and request these things.
You can ask a question always of the principal, or you can even email me if you have a question about security. We do try to deploy, we do deploy our security personnel, even though they're primarily based at the secondary schools. If there's large events at the elementary school, we deploy them around the district to be at different events, certainly large events. Even tonight, we have a security person on duty who you may have seen when you come in. So, not to mention this is the safest place in Livingston right now.
Example, Dr. Block?
Yeah.
I'm not questioning what was done.
Yeah.
For example, the Livingston High School back to school night, right? I'm sure things were done for a reason, but there were parents or there were handouts given with each specific room number, with the exit signs and everything. God forbid these things go into the wrong hands. Again, I'm not questioning what was done. I'm sure there were good reasons for doing it, but this is just an example why things like this are important for back to school nights and events like this. There were exit signs, every small detail of the school, signs from where it is, where the other rooms are, how far they are, take the stairways down. Again, 5 years down the line, I wouldn't have questioned this, but now,
And it's something we think about too, trust me. So, we would, like you said, 5, 6 years ago, handing those out would have been second nature. Now we sit down and we discuss it and determine what we're going to hand out and how, and but you certainly have to, as you noticed probably at the high school back to school night, trying to run that night without those people needed directions anyway, right?
No questions asked about that, but maybe there's a better way that you all can think better.
No, we appreciate it, and that is why I think the message tonight hasn't been our work is done, but our work is very much ongoing, and it's ongoing almost on a daily basis, and that's why I get to call the chief 7 days a week, and he gets to call me, I called him at his son's graduation, and he talked to me. So that was we got to see his son graduate. I haven't asked. So.
It was the first time I probably would have answered.
I just want to add one other thing. I'm sorry, one second. One other thing I wanted to add too is the other challenge, and they talked a lot about the priorities at the state, is that I don't want to say competing priorities, but to your point, we have a lot of people coming into a building. God forbid the science wing, lab starts to go up in flames. That's where the challenge is, because we obviously have to follow, the code that says everyone needs to know where the evacuation. I'm not disagreeing, but it's one of those challenging type things, because you don't want everyone in the building, and then God forbid there's a fire, and now all of a sudden everyone looks at each other and and doesn't know where to go. So
I know she's been.
Yep. She's ready. I just wanted to add that to the other fire.
To do a dance, but first I want to say thank you so much for all you do. It doesn't go unnoticed and unappreciated. I see you guys in motion. I'm a new mom into the space, and it's been incredible, absolutely incredible.
Welcome.
Incredible work. Thank you so much. I do have a question from a cyber perspective. We understand in general from a risk perspective, internal and external bad actors are, when you look at the statistics around that, and the number being overwhelmingly on the side of internal bad actors. My question is, when you look at the internet access, like I know that certain sites are blocked, what about the attempts to access? Like, you look at the numbers and you think about very sad numbers around suicide and all these other statistics. Is anyone monitoring that? Is there a conversation had for students who may be in a bad mental space who are looking to access certain types of information, regardless of whether or not it's denied? Is someone having a follow-up conversation either with the administration or with a family member to understand what's happening there as a follow-up?
It's a great question, and I'm going to very happily let Ms. Redmond or Mrs. O'Leary.
Thank you. So we do have a specific system just for the student devices that does not only filtering, but it will alert if there's certain websites that a student attempts or certain words that they might put into a document. And for each school, there's designated personnel that get those alerts and then follow up with students depending on what that alert is. And some of them are false positives, but it's still the way that we try to prevent things. Do you want to add anything?
It's very sensitive. I will tell you that. It's very sensitive. A student could just that one trigger word that you may not even think you would think would be a trigger word, and I'm getting guardian messages to alert me that there has been something that they're trying to look at. It also goes to our school counselors, so you know that it's going to the people that are most ready to step into action when need be.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we got one last, two more. We'll do the two on the side here. Three? All right, three.
Sorry.
That's no problem.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for everything you do. This is truly a labor of love. I cannot say anything else. I wanted to ask, just piggybacking on the concern that came up. When you recognize that there is somebody with a mental health issue involved, what are the steps that trigger? Because right now, you know that there is no access to mental health care across the nation. It is extremely hard to find personnel. What are the steps taken in tandem with the family or with the student that's involved? Where are we with that?
Okay, it's my turn.
I see you're ready to go.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's an important question. And as Mrs. O'Leary said, our schools are filled with professionals, counselors, psychologists, social workers, student assistance counselors trained to work with students, but also to assess risk. We have a hierarchy of systems that reports come through teachers, custodians, secretaries, guardian, any of the systems, and then our students are screened by 2 mental health professionals together. We then access parents, and we give either resources such as Care Solace, which is an agency that we've engaged with. And I have to say, we have more than 400 people who have accessed it over the summer to get resources, which would be a really quick response. We also have access to mental health medical professionals like psychiatrists. We also work collaboratively with some of the local behavioral health centers and hospitals. So we will, if we were to send a student out for a risk assessment, whether that is suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, we would give parents hospitals that we know will do that sort of psychiatric clearance. And then there's always follow-up. There's always a reentry meeting, or there's a follow-up in service care, and how people are accessing that care. And then we have layers upon layers of mental health supports in school. And we will be soon, probably by the end of this month, putting out some information about our secondary schools. Heritage in the high school will have after school mental health support that's coming through our ESSER funds that we kind of talked about last year, that we're going to start to have access to more students who are having, some difficulties, some difficult days, want to have someone to talk to. So there's layers and layers, but that crisis intervention has a very specific protocol.
Thank you.
So this is just a follow-up to that question, but how have things changed from before the escalation of incidents across the country to where we are right now in terms of interventional mental health support? It sounds really great what you guys are doing, but what has changed, and are you more confident that we can better identify those higher risk individuals and intervene more so than say what we've done in the past?
Yeah, Lisa needs the mic.
I don't know why I'm also.
Maybe I've been talking too much. That's a great question. I will say that in Livingston, we've always had a heightened level of mental health support. So just to say, in response to what's happening in the world, what's happening in our nation, what's happening as a result of COVID, we've accelerated training for teachers, accelerated training for our own staff. We've increased numbers of probably not in the recent years, but numbers of school counselors, numbers of student assistance counselors, numbers of psychologists. We have a clinical counseling program on site. We've had that for many years, but we've increased the number of counselors in the recent years. What's really been different is this use of a system called Care Solace. That's been the most advanced change for us because, again, we've always had a lot of mental health support. What we've heard from families is accessing outside support has been challenging. And so Care Solace is an agency that will connect people confidentially and use your insurance to really locate mental health providers that will have a quick turnaround for appointments. So that, from my perspective, that's one of the greatest advancements we've had. But we've also engaged with New Jersey and the National Mental Health First Aid Organizations to train our staff, which is really, if you think about first aid as the first responders, we've engaged in a 15-month training cycle so that all of our administrators have been trained. We've already had training on our opening professional development day for about 60 people, and we're moving to have our own trainers on site to train everyone from our teachers to our teacher assistants to our custodians, our cafeteria workers, and our bus drivers, and our goal is to have that completed by the end of 2023. So that really is the next higher level, and again, we're using that federal ESSER grant money to get a lot of that taken care of so that we will, by the end, have trained, hopefully, all 1,000 employees in our district. So we have a pretty structured plan to do that, and we have a lot of our own counseling staff who are willingly becoming trainers so that it's not a one-hit, somebody comes in and gives you a training and leaves. These will be cycles of people who will be not only training but accessible to answer questions, to reteach, and to ensure that our staff really can see the markers of difficulty in students, from the most minute little things to the biggest terrible things.
And I just pray that you guys continue to do that, like, on maintenance, because it's just like a not one-off conversation.
Yeah, no, I get
And you have to form, like, the Hive mindset so that there's constant, confrontation with these students, especially at the level when they're most greatly exposed, like with the teachers and, like you said, a bunch of people.
Agreed.
I would just say that the mental health first aid, as Lisa was listing off, bus drivers, secretaries, teachers, she didn't say superintendent. I got the training this summer, and as somebody who's been in education for 23 years now, it's a game changer in terms of the vision of having 1,000 employees that are looking out for signs and symptoms of mental health struggle, and how that plays into just expanding exponentially the set of eyes, trained eyes, that are on our kids. It relates right to what we've been talking about tonight from the beginning, that this is a really important step in making sure our whole district is tuned into the prevention aspect. It's all linked into school security, school safety, and student wellness, which of course is paramount as well.
And I did forget to say that we also have in our plan to train our 10th graders in mental health first aid, and that's actually going to happen at the end of their driver's ed cycle. They're the earliest high school students to get health in a school year. So the same concept that we have trainers on our staff we're having our health teachers and some of our counseling professionals trained in the teen mental health first aid to train the entire 10th grade class. And we will do that every single year with this group, with the mental health first aid, so that we will have scores upon scores of students who are trained. Mental health first aid doesn't recommend training students before 9th or 10th grade. So we will have students who, while they report quite often to us, will actually be trained in the signs and symptoms and the process for accessing the trusted adults in the building who can help. So I forgot them. I can't believe I forgot that. So
I'm sorry to jump in. It's been a very quick comment that I think is worthwhile to say. A lot of these layers are all great, but they take days and weeks to identify and have meetings and work on. My son had an incident where he and his friends in the middle of the night saw a post that a kid made that was like a lot of suicidal ideation involved. And they didn't know of a button to push at the moment. And I think a lot of these things, you always hear, they posted something and they did something, you know? And I just recommend putting something in place as a 24/7 monitoring where the kids have a button to push, because my kid came to me in the middle of the night and woke me up and said, we just saw this and we're really scared for this kid. And they didn't know what to do. So I went to the police station in the middle of the night. And I put a report in.
24/7 operation.
But the kids don't know the button, and the kids have the finger on the pulse of these types of things.
Yes.
I think even better than your teams and your health drivers.
We have to make sure they know, besides waking up Dad, which was a great idea, they should, where else they should do in the middle of the night.
They should just know, like, I could just screenshot this and send it to an email address, and someone's going to see it right now and act on it. Because
we've been teaching parents for a long time. If the hair on the back of your neck stands up, right, don't ignore it. Please don't ignore it. Bring it to us. One of the benefits of living in Livingston is that if you come to the Livingston Police Department, or if you call the Livingston Police Department, you're going to get a police response. Right? We'll send anybody.
I did, and you guys sent.
We'll send any officer on anything. Right? That's the benefit of living in Livingston. So we want to be part of the prevention. Obviously, we talked a lot about when something actually happens, but we want to be part of the prevention and early interaction and involvement. And there are many times that Dr. Block calls me off hours, and we send a law enforcement officer to the home. We would rather have that happen before somebody shows back up at school that maybe should not be at school that day. Yeah. We would rather address that at the home, and that's what Detective Mulaney will have him switch his hat. And he goes from security professional for the Livingston Police Department to juvenile detective, and we'll make Detective Mulaney switch his hat, and he'll take a uniformed officer to the house and have an intervention then.
So I was going to say, ironically, another issue that we're having in Livingston, and I guess this will be a different forum, is the stolen vehicle issue. And I remember we recovered a stolen Mercedes over by Allen Fides Plumbing, and while we were literally handcuffing the suspect and towing the car, my phone was going crazy in my back pocket. It was Chief Marsh's, and it may have even been this exact job, and I was at the boy's house at 11 p.m. that night with the uniformed officer, talking to him, talking to the family, and I think Chief Marsh said it best. It's going to be a wake-up call when you have two police officers coming to your house at 11 o'clock at night, and we address it proactively. Right.
We don't ignore anything, and we will always defer to the professionals. We're not healthcare professionals, but we do have police officers that have been doing this a long time, and people are our business. We don't make a product, so we provide a service, and we like to think we're pretty good at it when it comes to matters like this.
When this happened, did you circle back with the school and that was taken care of?
I got a call from the principal in the morning. Okay. He said, I think it was the principal in the morning, just updating me, thank you, and yeah, so definitely. But it would be great if the kids had like
the things we've been saying are true. we do talk.
If there was an anonymous button the kids could push, I think it would be something.
No, sir, you said something though that's slightly concerning. You said, I wish there was a way I could just send a screenshot or something to an email and then someone will see it and act on it. For right now, that doesn't exist. Right now, it's a phone call. Right? A phone call has to be made. Okay? There's not someone, if you have Kevin's email address and you say, I love Kevin, he's the best guy, he knows what to do, let's send him an email at 5:48 a.m. Kevin's not sitting in front of his computer at 5:48. It has to be a phone call. I know that sounds like common sense, but it happens.
But whoever gets it can make a phone call, because here you had 8 kids who all saw it and were concerned, but my son was the only one that felt compelled to do something about it. The other 7 didn't feel comfortable going to their parents, you know.
Well, that's when you should get all 7 of the parents and have a parent meeting.
Yeah.
I was talking about the articles, so, you know, we do read a lot of materials about school security, and there's a new thing out from the Secret Service about plots that have been foiled because people have come forward, and it says the #1 group of people that have come forward are the peers, the students. So making sure that our students know if it is, you know, midnight or 2 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, what they should do and where they should go is really very important, and I appreciate it.
And the kids are our #1 source of information.
Yeah, they are. They're also they are our #1 source.
There is no dumb question, there is no dumb phone call.
Right.
If you're not sure, make the call. That's it.
You know, sometimes, either last year, I know there was at least once, maybe twice, you got a letter from us that there was a perceived threat. It's no longer a threat. I mean, some of these comments are fairly innocuous, but you're not sure. And when we get those, we go right to the police, and without hesitation, they jump on it as if it were, you know, a specific and detailed threat, and we don't mess around, and that's part of the prevention here.
And from a hierarchy standpoint too, we all report, I mean, the police chief is responsible to the county prosecutor, but also to the attorney general, and there's a lot of policies in place and procedures in place, and we talked earlier about an anti-Semitic case that happened, or any kind of bias case. There's a lot of requirements and mandates for us to follow, and obviously we take every one of those extremely serious as well, and a lot of reporting at the state level. And there's lots of layers of oversight and checks and balances for that.
Yep. And I'm glad the story came out about the report and that you got the call from the principal, so things went right. So, and that's our goal, is for things to go right, and you know, if we need to make improvements, we work together to do that. I know that I'm very fortunate to work in a community with outstanding professionals who support us as educators and help us with what our primary responsibility is to keep our students safe and secure, and to make sure that every day when you send them to us, hopefully we send them home with a smile on their face. Unless there's like a pre-calc test or something like that, then we don't take responsibility at all for what the look on their faces. Anyway, in all sincerity, I really appreciate, this is an hour and a half of all these folks' time, so if we can give them a round of applause. But, go ahead.
For those that don't know, October 1st is the fire department's 100th anniversary. We're going to be conducting a parade from town center down to the Oval, and then we're going to have a field day in front of the gazebo for all the kids. So please tell your families, your friends. We want to make it we're also making it the kickoff of Fire Prevention Month. That's going to be our open house. We'll have fire prevention literature, handouts. We're going to try to get the smoke mob, safety trailer from St. Barnabas. So please pass that around.
And there'll be plenty of security there.
Yeah. He's not happy with the overtime.
Keeping your firemen in check.
That's right. But again, please support the Livingston Fire Department. Again, I want to thank them for their time, but I also want to thank all of you for your time. We want to do more forums like this during the course of the year, and plan to, and having people give an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes of their evening when you could just as easily, I guess, be watching Monday Night Football or whatever it is that you prefer to watch. You being here really is so important to us and means so much. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening.